Hello and welcome to another dodgy dyno video featuring a Ford Focus. Not just any Ford Focus, this is a Ford Focus ST170. ST, I believe, stands for sanitary towel, which is a strange thing to name a car after. And the 170 obviously stands for key features. Ah, here we go. Oh, it's the power. Oh, yes, of course, it's the power. If you believe that, by the way, if you didn't get that joke, then I really, I pity every parents' evening that your parents had to go to when you were a kid, because honestly. Right, yes, so this is a Ford Focus ST170. According to the specs here, the blurb, it has a 2-litre 16-valve ST engine, which is a load of bollocks because it has a Zetec engine. It doesn't have a Geratec engine in it at all. Geratec ST, but then they put Geratec ST on the 5-cylinder engine in the Ford Focus ST or Ford S-Max, and that's a Volvo engine, so this is Ford being Ford. Now there is a chance that Ford are going to be Ford with the power figures. I'll explain. There are a number of different cars I've put on this dyno over the years. This dyno's been in the ground a long time and I have run a lot of cars on it, so I've got a pretty good knowledge of which cars hit the numbers and which cars don't, and there are certain cars that do and there are certain cars that don't. Now Fords aren't necessarily a mile off. They're not, I mean, sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not miles off, but they never really quite make it there. Until a couple of months ago, a Ford Fiesta Zetec S came in. Not only did that car prove me wrong, because it did exactly what it was supposed to do, it had been remapped. And that proved me wrong, because I've always believed that, you know, remaps on naturally aspirated cars, most of the time, are garbage. And that's just down to experience on the dyno. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first one is that the amount of cars I've had coming in with remaps that don't make the book figure, let alone what the remap claim they were going to make. And I can attest to that because this number plate here, this is a true story, was worn on the only car that has ever come in here and gone on the dyno and blown up. This number plate has previous. There is every chance that of some real jeopardy here. If this thing blows up today, that number plate needs to be exorcised, right? Exorcised, not taken for a walk. It needs to go to a church and have a priest throw his water on it. So this number plate, hopefully, being that sort of curses and things are all a load of bollocks, I think it'll be okay. But this car is remapped. The number plate this car used to be on was an MGTF. That was remapped. Apparently, it remapped it from 160 horsepower to 180 horsepower. What it actually did was take it from 160 horsepower to 145 horsepower and then throw a piece of piston at the wall out of the exhaust. That is genuinely what happened. This car is also remapped, but this car doesn't have a dodgy Dave on the driveway remap. This car has a Bluefin. And I don't know if you remember Bluefin. It's a bit old school now, but I remember them back in my days when I used to work at a Ford dealer. And as I remember, Bluefin was an easy way of getting like 50 horsepower in a Focus ST at the time, the later 5-cylinder one. It was basically a tuning box that you bought, and you plugged it into the OBD, and it would remap the car for you. It had a predetermined map on it, and you could upload it to the car, keep the box, and then later in the future, you can remove the map again. It was actually quite good, and it was, I think it was approved by Ford dealers. I think you used to be able to buy it in Ford dealers. Hit me in the comments and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you did used to be able to get that done at Ford dealers. And then they, I think, got replaced with, maybe not all dealers, but then Mountune came along, and I think that might have usurped it. I don't know. I could be talking shite. But I think that's what happened. I mean, it's not like I used to work in a Ford dealer or anything, is it? So yes, to the matter in hand, a Ford Focus ST170. This car predated the Ford Focus RS, which came along in the same colour as this. It was a 2-litre Zetec, despite the fact they call it a Geratec. I don't get Ford, honestly, don't get Ford. But it's a Geratec badged 170 horsepower, 2-litre 16-valve, naturally aspirated engine. The difference between this and your normal Ford Focus 2-litre, which was about 135 horsepower, I think, is the fact this one has, well, it has a couple of things. It has variable valve timing on the engine, so it does rev, apparently, to 7,000 RPM is where the peak power is. So this should be quite fun. This should be quite a good little fun car to drive if it was a little bit lighter and had a bit more torque. But the other thing this car had was its own gearbox. It had not a bespoke gearbox, but it had a Get Drag 6-speed gearbox. It was actually, I think, quite a nice gearbox to use. I imagine that makes it quite fun. I imagine it's quite fun to stir through the box, and that is what this car is supposed to be about. The Focus, when it came out, was a bit revolutionary for Ford. They'd made a lot of stodgy cars in the past, and firstly it started with the Mondeo, and then the Focus came along, and they had cars like the Puma and things like that. They started to make cars that were actually quite good to drive, so these are good fun cars to drive. Most Focuses, I find, the Mark 1s, are like sitting on a bar stool inside. You're kind of really high up, and there's no support or anything, but the seats in this are fantastic. They're Recaro, I'm guessing, because it's a Ford. Yes, they are Recaro. Really, really good. So there is an elephant in the room, and that is that most Fords I've done, as I say, over the years have not quite done what they're meant to do. The Fiesta came along a little while ago, and it did. But the Fiesta was quite a young, fresh-faced, you know, healthy, well-looked-after car, and it had blue indicators. Is that the indicators? Oh, no, they've moved. I swore the indicators were there. On Focuses, maybe? Oh, that was embarrassing. Yeah, so the Fiesta came along and kind of proved me wrong a little bit. Now, this one has two jobs to do. Three jobs to do. And I'll tell you what they are. The first one is that this isn't the first ST170 that's ever been on the dyno. The first one was a bog standard Ford Focus ST170, which really should have been called an ST153, because that's what it was producing. The next one, I think, did about 160 something, but that one had an induction kit, if I remember rightly. Could be wrong. So ST170s do have previous on the dyno for not quite hitting the numbers. The next problem is that this car is remapped, as I say, and it's a Ford. So those two things don't often work quite well on the dyno, but the Fiesta came along, the Mark 7 Z-Tech S, and blew that out of the water and proved, actually, no, that's not a hard and fast rule. Some of them are good. The third thing I'm going to look at with this car, or the third thing I'm intrigued to know about, is the engine. I'm going to pop the bonnet. To do this, because it's a Ford of this era, you don't pull a lever in the car. And I can't figure out if this is a good idea or not. Judging by the amount of Mondeo bonnet locks I used to sell, I'm guessing it's not, because I'm guessing this all seizes up. You put the key in, turn it one way, and then turn it the other way. Now, it's probably a bit silly and a bit pointless, but at the same time, it means you don't have to have a cable that fails eventually, and it's a security feature. It means no one can get in without the key. Now, the big Duratec ST cover thing is missing off the top because I've got my rolling road plugged into it. It's actually down there. So that was normally on the top. I think this is a variable valve timing actuator of some sort. I'm pretty sure I used to sell those. This car also has the IMRC, the Inlet Manifold Runner Control Unit, that I know about from my days with Ford Mondeo ST200, which basically means it has a pair of secondary valves in an inlet manifold and a box hidden with a circuit board and a servo motor in it, and it pulls a cable and opens and shuts those valves. And I believe that box is, I can just see it. It's not this one. It's that one down there. You see? Yeah. And when I first opened this bonnet, I thought, oh, that's a stupid place to put it. Because the Duratec engine, the exhaust is at the back. And then I realised, hang on, this isn't a Duratec engine. It says it is, but the exhaust manifold is on the front. This is a Z-Tech engine. This is basically a blacktop Z-Tech engine with a variable valve timing head. Well, certainly what it looks like anyways. In fact, yeah, one of the things I'm intrigued with this engine and this car is, I've obviously talked about remaps being potentially sometimes or potentially good. I've talked about Ford power figures perhaps not being great over the years. In fact, if I'm completely honest, the Fiesta that came in the other day, which is a video on the channel that it was filmed, and all the Pinto engines I've done over the years, although they don't produce much, it is what they're supposed to produce. They're always kind of there or thereabouts. They're the only ones. Everything else is a bit hit and miss. The interesting thing with this one is this car is what would be considered in Ford circles to be high mileage. I wouldn't really consider it to be high mileage, but it's done 187,000 miles. Now, I know from my time in Ford circles that if you're on a forum or a Facebook group or something like that, and you see someone wanted ad, they want a car, I want to get a whatever, a Mondeo, a Focus, a Fiesta, blah, 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 Galaxy. And 9 times out of 10, it always goes, nothing over 80,000 miles, nothing over 90,000 miles. And it's like, well, I come from the world of like French cars, so I'm kind of a bit, this is alien to me. I never see this in my sort of you know, the world of cars I normally have, I don't see that at all, because it's kind of like, well, mileage is not really a massive thing. Like, higher mileage cars in a French car, certainly, you're going to have a horrible steering wheel and a horrible gear knob. It's all going to be worn away, but mechanically, it'll be all right. Now, I don't know, going back to this, because this is the subject, I don't know how this is going to fit in that. So I guess the best thing I could do is probably stop talking and find out. I want this to do well. Well, I kind of don't, because it's owned by my brother-in-law, and if it does badly, I can take the piss out of him mercilessly. I can rib him about it, especially if it gets less than his sister's, my wife's, Saxo, which managed nearly 140 the other day, when it should be 120, because I took the airbox off. Some cars are underquoted from new, so and some of them are overquoted. TVR.
Place your bets now!
Last thing before I get on with it is, this is the first car that's going on the new website. So it's not a new website, it's my original website, but it's the new page on the website. There are now dyno pages, because there used to be a chart on the wall here, and that will return, don't worry. I know you're not really bothered, but the website is going to have 3 pages on it. One of them is for you like content creators, YouTubers, Instagram, and channel members and patrons and things like that. And there's just it's basically a table listed highest performing car down to lowest performing car. And it's basically made so that Auto Shenanigans can be at the top of a list, because he would be at the top of that one. But the other 2, which is what this will go into, there is production and modified classes. Now this will go in the modified class because it does have a K&N Typhoon intake system, induction kit, and it has the Bluefin remap. So this will go into that, but that is done by percentage. So when you look at those graphs down the side, it's not highest power at the top, it's highest percentage over book figure or under book figure. And that's how the tables are arranged, because I don't think it's fair to have a 1.3 litre car that's supposed to have 75 horsepower and comes in and makes 75 horsepower be lower on a table than a car that's supposed to have 200 and produces 190. Because it's like, no, hang on, the 1.3 did what it was meant to do. You see what I mean? Does that make sense? So this will go into the modified. I hope it is in the green. I hope it's in the positive percentage. We will see. Right. Let's go. I'm going to leave the bonnet open for this one, because otherwise the RPM sensor thing gets knocked. So it doesn't make a huge amount of difference to the power figures, honestly. I mean, if I can get away with doing one with it shut, I'll do it to prove it. But yeah, plus it will sound better like this. Right, yeah, so we got problems. I don't know what is going on with this thing, but the ESP light is on, because that's normal, because it's on a rollers here. Back wheels are static, front wheels are spinning, so the ABS and the ECU, which is all interconnected, goes whoa, like that. But normally it allows you to carry on. There's been moments where I thought it's because I had the door open. Maybe it's because the handbrake's on, I don't know, but I've managed to do one run so far, but I wasn't recording it, and it lost its signal at the end because of the HT leads on this thing are losing interference all over the place, and it was screwing the figures up, so it terminated the numbers at the end. But what's happening is I'm getting up, and then the ESP's cutting in, and it's restricting it, and then it's slamming its own brakes on, so the front brakes just lock. And it pulls itself to a halt, and I shat myself the first time because I thought, hang on, is the dyno gone pop or something? No, it's the car. So I don't know what it's doing. I'll try putting the bonnet down again. I'll try taking the handbrake off, but I like to have the handbrake on because it just gives it a bit more stability. But I don't remember having this problem on the other ones. The other two for ST170s I've done, I don't remember having an issue. I mean, it's a long time ago, so maybe there was, but... See, like, bits of rubber down there where it's slamming its own brakes on. This wheel, I mean, I'll have a look at the footage later, but... This wheel is just... It's just slamming its... The ABS pump, I'm guessing, is just... I didn't even think it could do that. I thought it could only cut the circuit, not power it. Oh no, I suppose it can. It's got ESP. Maybe that's how the ESP works. It uses the brakes. So the ESP is basically having a duck fit. It's just locking this wheel. You can feel it inside when it's about to go. It's like traction control cutting in. I keep saying ESP. It's not, is it? It's traction control. A very primitive form of it. But yeah, you can feel it cutting in. It just cuts in. Starts to stutter on the pedal and you think, oh, here we go, and before you can come off the throttle it just locks that wheel up completely. That is bizarre. And I'm trying to turn it off, but all the lights are on, so there's a button in the center console, so I'll push that and it doesn't make a difference. You know, I made jokes about that number plate being cursed. Alright, so some time has passed and I'm plugged into the mainframe. Got these are the fault codes on the thing. Look at it. Let's try clearing them all. I mean, the ABS traction control, I'd expect to see it because it's on the dyno. But a lot of the others were down to low voltage. So now the engine is running. No warning lights on at all. So I'm going to put the handbrake back on because it's better with that on. And if I try and turn the traction control off, I'm going to push the traction control button. Right, there we go. Now I'm going to try to do the run again. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to scream. Right, I think that works. I mean, it didn't do its silly bugger thing. Oh, it did work, and it's not done the 158.7. And the mad thing is, it revved and revved and... How high did it go? Look at the revs! 7,000. The limiter didn't... When's the limiter supposed to cut in on an ST170? I dipped it, because... I wasn't looking at the graph, I was looking at the warning lights on the dashboard to see if it played silly buggers. Yeah, I wasn't actually looking at what the graph was doing, so I was just sort of waiting for the limiter to come in. But I dipped the clutch just because it sounded like it wasn't going anymore, and to be fair, it's not. It's got, as far, I mean, 6.5? Yeah, that's not great. What's the actual engine torque? 142. I don't know what that's supposed to be in Newton meters, but I'll put it on the screen now. And it's a proper peaky... I mean, that's not actually what I'd expect to find with a graph on a car with variable valve timing and with those secondary runners, because that's what's supposed to iron that bit out. That looks like a car that doesn't have variable valve timing or intake runners. It's just like... It looks like a peaky twin cam engine where it's kind of flat, kind of flat, kind of flat, and then off it goes when it gets on cam at 4,000. The torque spread's actually not bad, but it is dipping in the middle there. Suggests to me that that's actually supposed to go across there, but it wouldn't affect this. So either the cams are worn, or it is just... I mean, I'll see if I can dig out another ST170 power run. There might be one on here somewhere. So the red car there is... a standard ST170, although the revs are slightly out on that one. That's because we synced that one manually, so we didn't get it quite right. So don't pay any attention to the position of the revs, but it did this thing here where it kind of carried on and peaked at just over 7,000. In fact, let's see if I can see what the numbers were. If I click up here, 164.6 at 6,600. Oh, so the highest was actually back here somewhere. And the torque does doesn't have this dip, but and the actual torque at the engine, 145 at 5.4, 143 at 5.3. So the torque is there or thereabouts. So it suggests the engine itself is okay. But of course that worn camshafts could affect a lack of power at the top end and actually give you half decent torque lower down, although that's not really low down, is it? But right, I'm just trying another run with it. It's weird how it runs, seems to run quite happily, but so now the ABS is on. I had to turn the engine off because I was sat there for ages faffing about with the computer. So now I don't know if the traction control is going to play silly buggers or not. I'll bring you in the car. That's what I'll probably do. I'll bring you in and you can see what it does. Right, so I'll tell you what, it might not be making any power, but my God, these seats are good. So yeah, the traction control button is down there, but the light is already on. So if I push it, I don't know if it's done anything. But let's try it. So I'll go straight into second. So we're a bit back. Oh God, I've got a buckled wheel here or something, or an egg-shaped tyre. Oh, it's going. It's going. It did it. Lit up like a Christmas tree. ECU lights on now, look. He did say he wondered if it had an IMRC fault sort of lingering in the ECU. We'll have a look at that in a sec, and that could explain that dip in the middle. It doesn't explain the lack of power at the top, unless they're jammed open sort of partially. 158 again. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think we're going to get any more than 158, are we? Why must every Ford turn into a drama? Powertrain control module. Inlet manifold runner control stuck open. Right, so there's something going on, isn't there? So the ABS we knew. Yeah, rear wheel signals lost, that's fine. Airbag circuit open. Oh. Airbag doesn't work either. That's good. Right, yeah, so that inlet manifold runner control is probably the little box of tricks on the bulkhead, I would think, unless the valves are gummed up and stuck. Yes, that's the IMRC unit down the back there, bolted to the bulkhead. I did a video on the Mondeo in honour of a guy we knew from the channel who passed away, and I talked about my Mondeo and the IMRC unit on that, on the V6. So the second set of valves are going to be probably... Oh, is that the cable? It feels a bit thin for a cable. No, that's a hose, isn't it? So the cable will go... It might be that block, that join down there in the manifold. Yeah, it might be a second set of valves in there. I'm just trying to see if... Yeah, I can't see. Too much crap in the way. But it's, yeah, it's likely, I would think, that the control unit at the back there is dead. Because it's like 20 years old now, this car. 2004, according to the TOPDON I just plugged into it. So, yeah, that's 20 years old. It's kind of done its time, hasn't it? At least they haven't mounted it on the engine. That's what they did with the Mondeo. Yes, they actually mounted it to the bloody engine. This one's not, it's on the bulkhead. It should be a little bit cooler and out the way there, but... So it seems to me, I think what we've got here is potentially a slightly poorly focus. 153 is what a previous one made, and that didn't have an ECU light on, so that suggested that it didn't have an inlet manifold runner control unit problem. But basically... the inlet manifold runner control unit is a second set of throttle butterflies in the inlet manifold. So it's got a second set of flaps. So when you put your foot down and you say, right, all the air go through, and then the ECU reads how much air is going in, and it decides how much fuel to stick in with it, and when to time the injectors, and when to time the spark, and everything like that. But the ECU also thinks, well, I do know a little bit better than you do. Because you'll find this if you drive your car down the road. If you just floor it at low revs in an old school naturally aspirated car, not necessarily a modern car, but an old school cable operated throttle, naturally aspirated, if you just boot it at 2,000 revs, it actually takes a little bit longer to get going than it would have done if you just given it a little bit of throttle and then a little bit more and a little bit more and kind of like pushed it down as the revs climbed. And you think to yourself, oh, is that like a weird sort of, is this mind over matter? And no, it's not. It will make less power at low revs if you don't have full throttle, but it will make more torque. And what the manifold runner control unit is doing is saying, right, you want full power, I get it, but we're going to modulate how much air is coming through that manifold at low revs so that you don't lose torque. And then as the revs go up, we'll slowly open and you can have that full power that you've requested. So it's kind of optimizing your foot, if that makes sense. The problem with them is they break and they don't work perfectly sometimes. So what could have happened with this is it could be that the flaps, there's one of two problems. The flaps, it's probably the control unit, which is the thing on the bulkhead I pointed to earlier. It's probably that. But it might also be the flaps themselves. It could be that the flaps are jammed sort of 3/4 of the way open. So that would mean that you'd lose low down torque because they need to be more shut than that. But it also means that once you've gone past 5,000, they need to be more open than that. And they're not. So it's restricting it, possibly. So it's either going to be that or it's just affecting it at low revs and the camshafts are slightly worn or something along those lines. Either way, she has failed. She has fallen over on the dyno. That is a shame. But it does mean I can take the piss out of my brother-in-law. So that is also a positive. For me, not him. Right, well, yeah. Okay, well, so far the number of Fords that have done well on the dyno is still 1. 1 of all the Fords that have been on, 1 has done well. Don't forget to check it out on the website. This car will be on there. It's going to be in the negative percentages, unfortunately, but we'll bring it back. We'll see if we can sort it, and we'll bring it back one day and try again. And in the meantime, keep an eye out for the next dyno run, whatever that is, and hopefully that one doesn't play up.